Welcome to the annual general meeting of the BTSYM Society Young Members. And thanks for joining in, and either in person or online, much appreciated as always. We had a slight delay, and I do apologize for that. Mostly because I had a hard time to prepare my slides. So that is because there was too much to fit into too little time. And it's been too much, way too much, and I'm very proud for that. Before we start our lecture, Negin is going to present. Negin is an engineer for Rumble, right? Cool. A very interesting presentation. And that's the agenda, yeah? So the title is, Can Tunneling Ever Be Sustainable? But before that very interesting presentation, I'm going to summarize what's happened with the young members the past year, which I had the absolute pleasure, delight, and honor to chair the group. And after that, Tom is going to do an introduction for the plan that's upcoming for the next year. So, summary. If you've been some time together with us, you know that this usually is a slide that summarizes the achievement of certain young members, certain individual. Yep, Harding Prize winner, Doug Allenby medals. We do all that. But this year, I think the achievement belongs to the entire group. It's been a very, very, very creative year. First of all, we came back strong. We had in-person lectures and workshops, and they were very well attended. If you attended one, last one we had tonight, earlier this afternoon, most of you were there. And yeah, you know, it's really nice. And we also had lots of collaborations with sister groups and organizations overseas. We had the opportunity to work with Think Deep Nigeria, join young members of Austria, other young member groups of the ITA, Engineers Ireland. We had site visits, we had fun visiting museums. We had a strong presence in WTC 2023 and a very successful conference where we got to showcase what young members in UK have done. We had outreach to universities, we had some really nice advanced courses. Kudos to the Professional Development Committee on that, and also the Schools and University subcommittee. And we had collaborations and outreach with construction youth and tunnel skills. That led to a very substantial LinkedIn growth and YouTube channel growth. And of course, we grew in numbers, so we updated the plans and the policies, as Tom is going to say. Once again, thanks for everybody, the subcommittee. A big thank you to the leads of the teams, as well to every single member that volunteered for that. And I do urge you to volunteer this year. Just a few pictures. You can see smiley faces. You can see a very international family here. That's actually from WTC. Being part of the young member group means you can open up to peers around the world, and you get the opportunity to, connect. That's us. That's our family in the conference. Thanks again to everybody who contributed and attended. Schools and universities, amazing job, guys. Amazing job this year. And that's also for me. I wanted to fill the slides with pictures, honestly, and videos. Maybe we'll do that for Monday, St. Barbara's Day. We'll see. But all the best for Tom and the new subcommittee. I'm pretty sure they're going to do a cracking job. Excellent.
All right. Well, first of all, I'd just like to thank everyone in the room for making it on what feels like the first winter, autumn day of the year. I was just on holiday in the southern United States, so this is a bit of a shock for me to get home. But thank you very much for making it in person. So I think, this was just the group, the usual suspects from 2023. So coming on to next year. I'm not going to read out all of this because you can go back and see it on YouTube later, and I'm going to be sending out 2024 plan with the invitations to apply for subcommittee roles. But I just wanted to set some clear objectives for what I'd like to achieve in my time as chair for this year, and how I want to keep my team focused. So these are the main ones that I've come up with. Would appreciate your comments if you have any. My email will be later on a slide. That's it right there. Just btsym@britishtunneling.com. In terms of the team upcoming for this year, I think this organogram shows the number of people that are typically involved. Some do more than others, but really, I think what I wanted to illustrate here is that we can accommodate as many people that want to contribute as possible. So there isn't a massive limit on numbers. We want to do as much as we can. So the bits that's encircled in dash blue is what's referred to as the subcommittee. So applications for those will be released on Monday if you'd like to get involved. And all of the people slightly above that blue box are the subcommittee chairs, which are selected from the previous year's subcommittees. So these are for the Secretary and Vice Chair, Arabelle, and Professional Development, Aya, Schools and Universities, Azil, and Media and Social is Solomon. So I'm going to be pushing them to recruit a good team under them. The better team they have, the less work they have to do. And then more just usual suspects, so past committee members who have kind of retired but are still around to help out. So I just wanted to do a shout out to them to say thank you. And then the new news for this year is that I've agreed with the BTS technical committees that we'll take on a bit of a task ourselves as the young members. And we've agreed that one of the areas we can help is to produce a bit of tunnel-specific guidance on carbon assessments, because the tunneling processes can be quite different for bridges or buildings where most of the literature exists. So Negin's going to talk a lot about sustainability and tunneling, and she's going to issue a bit of a call to action, so I won't do that myself, but if you would like to get involved, the way to do that would be to express your interest on the subcommittee applications next week. So that QR code's just to make sure that you're joined on the mailing list. We'll put it up at the end of the presentation so you can scan it. And yeah, I'll try to get that email out by Monday on subcommittee applications. And we'll also do that on our usual socials, LinkedIn, etc. So I think with that, that's the presentation, and I will hand over to Negin.
Yeah, I prefer that. I'm not the biggest fan of handheld mics, so I'll just stick with this. Also, I apologize, I might have a bit of cold, so you'll have to bear with my voice like this. Right, okay, so can tunneling be ever sustainable? I'm asking. If you have the questions, please find me and tell me. I don't know. Yeah, who I am is... Sorry, I've got too many screens to change the slides. I graduated from UCL with a master's degree. Been working in Ramble 2 years. Just got seconded to BAM to work on Silvertown site. And yeah, I've been working on a lot of the buzzwords and the big projects. So been very interesting 2 years so far. Today, we're going to talk about why do we care about sustainability? What are we doing today as an industry? And what can we do to get to a sustainable tomorrow? So, why do we care? Why do you care? If you can scan that code, and people online as well, and tell me, I'll come back to the specific slide again. The sooner the better, please. And I see some people without any phones out. Please take your phones out, scan it. I need all your answers. If you can't scan it, if it's too far, you can go menti.com and put that code in. I'll leave it on the screen for long enough for everyone to get that code. I know this is not the typical lecture format, but this is not the typical lecture. Right, hopefully everyone got those codes or scanned it. I'll leave it for a time. Oh, there we go.
I think 18 is pretty good.
Future. Survival.
BTS.
Global well-being. No. Okay. Don't know why you're here then. We'll get there. Speech. Longevity. Oh, that's my name. Thank you. BTS. We're going to circle back to this in a bit. But so far, okay. Global well-being, stability, future, climate change crisis. Why do we care? We usually care either because we care for the environment, for the future, for the climate change, or we have to care. There are legislations, people to tell you to care. You have to pay a price if you don't care. If you drive a car in the ultra low emission zone in London now, you have to pay. So there are other reasons, or there are incentives that makes you care. So you get money if you care. You bid for a project, and if you care for sustainability, you get that project. What is sustainability? It's a concept. It's a concept that, as a lot of you mentioned, future. It's a matter of having today's needs met without ruining it for the future generations. And making sure they have something to look forward to and meet their needs. But it comes with a harmony of all the three pillars: social, environmental, and economical. We can't focus on one and forget the other. We can't just look at the money aspects of it. We can't just say it's too expensive, so I'm not going to care. Or we can't just say because there's too much carbon, we can't build it, because we might need it because we need to connect societies. Page out of Ramble book, a little bit of plug here. Ramble came together and put together 4 unifying themes that fits into that 3 main pillars, which looks at decarbonising for net zero, resilient societies and livability, resource management and circular economy, and biodiversity and ecosystems. Which means all these 4 different themes need to come together, and client, people, society, company, every one of us needs to contribute to it to make a difference. We can't just look at it as a silo. We have to look at it as a system. There is a lot of thoughts and a lot of specialisms now in our everyday work. We have specialists in very specific structures, waterproofing, SCL, whatever we do, we have very specific tools, materials to look into. But reductionist thinking, where complex systems are in play, makes it impossible to look at it as a system. We can't think in silos. We have to spark innovation and help and identify and manage risks all together when we look at things as a system. So, what our tunnel is doing? To kind of answer that question I asked in the title, we're doing a lot. There's a lot happening in every tunneling project, either for money, for sustainability, or for program. Doesn't matter. We're doing good in a lot of aspects. We carry environmental impact assessment on almost every project we do to make sure that we are not disturbing any of the social communities or any of the flora, fauna, air and water quality, and noise, and a lot of other factors. We make sure we consider a lot of environmental impacts and whether or not this project is worth it. We do look at every construction method that we can to choose the most efficient, cheapest, and low carbon, which means we look at how we affect the communities, the social aspects. We look at low carbon environmental aspects of sustainability, and we do look at the money aspects, the cheapest, the quickest. We do look at how to resource and find sustainable materials. There's a lot of information on how to get rid of concrete or reduce the cement in concrete, or where we can go from recycled aggregates, recycled concrete. And that leads into the waste reduction and recycling. It's always good in terms of environmental and the circular economy aspects of it when we look at the sustainable materials and then build into all the waste reduction and recycling aspects into it. We do look at energy efficiency. There's a lot of tunnel projects that connects cables, the National Grid project now. There's a lot of work going on with nuclear systems. There's a lot of tunneling involved in those, that we're looking for greener energy and more efficient ways of getting energy around. We do look at reducing noise and air quality control. That's more in terms of every project that we do. There's a lot of health and safety aspects involved, so we try to get in a lot of control measures in place to make sure everybody involved is working all just around the project safe. And yeah, what else we do? We look at the biodiversity and habitat conservation. A lot of reasons we tunnel is because we don't want to disturb the habitats. It can be communities, it can be flora, fauna, it can be a lot of different aspects that why we don't just build it on the surface and we tunnel. Most tunnels have a community engagement aspects to them, but in a lot of projects nowadays, we try to reach out and engage with the community that we're disturbing, even for the construction duration. There's a lot of water management involved in tunneling. We tunnel to get a lot of sewers, a lot of canals, a lot of water systems involve tunneling. Sustainable transportation. One of the biggest tunneling projects right now, HS2. Well, I don't know how big it is anymore, but getting faster to different places. And again, cultural preservation. We try to disturb the least amount of buildings, cultural landmarks, etc., and try to preserve as much as we can by just going under rather than over. What is the rest of the industry doing? And that's where you kind of can take a note. Buildings are way ahead of everyone else in the industry, because it's a lot easier to look at a building as a system than an infrastructure project or a transport project. BRE, as everyone knows, the Building Research Establishment, have the BTSYM, and there is a lot of work involved. Most building projects now work with BTSYM and try to implement all the measures, try to calculate carbon and make sure they monitor it, and they're quite set with what they need to do for every project. They carry a lot of life cycle assessments, and that's only thanks to the milestones they've put and agreed upon. The other, that should not be in the middle of the page, but well, too late now. The Net Zero Bridges group, I have there's a lot of companies came together, created the Net Zero Bridges group, and they are an uncorporate organization made of a lot of people with a passion in sustainability, and they only focusing on bridges and carbon calculation in bridges. So far, they managed to carry out a lot of research and set some benchmarks for how to calculate carbon and where, why, and what to calculate, basically, which is always the biggest problem, where to start. Right, what should we do now? We have to act now. We have to start, educate, and inform. If you don't know, you have to seek it out. You have to ask your organization, your companies to provide training. If they can't provide any training for you, you have to seek out wherever it is available. If it is not, demand it. If we don't know, we can't act on it. So we need to learn, we need to educate ourselves. And this is also a shout out to the companies, maybe train a lot on sustainability. It's a good investment. Set baselines, realistic ones for our industry to achieve. As a designer, I tend to tweak a lot of numbers to save the tiniest bit of concrete. But then if you're working, say, on a CL, there's a lot of waste there. That tweak does not matter that much. So we should set baselines, monitor those baselines, and agree something that we can achieve as an industry, rather than as a silo, a designer, just a contractor, or just a client. We need to share the information we have. Every company, every designer has a carbon calculator somewhere in their dungeons. We don't share it. We don't know what the others know. But if we don't know, we can't collaborate. If I measure carbon different to the next person, if I care for biodiversity different to the next person, we can't all agree on the same baseline, and we can't make any difference. Encourage. There's a lot of different events, different celebration of achievements of people. Why don't we have those in sustainability aspects? Why don't we have NC awards for most sustainable engineer, most sustainable project? I've seen that one, actually. That's right, we do have that one, but not the engineers. But why don't we have more of that encouragement, incentives that make people just have that extra push? Where did we begin? The idea of this presentation came up when me and Thomas had a chat after one of these lectures about why can't we calculate carbon like everyone else in the industry, and why can't we just decide what to use and how to use it. There's a lot available. There's tons of information on how to calculate carbon. There's a lot of baselines and a lot of project timeline considerations, but we don't come into a conclusion on where and how. A carbon assessment is essentially just finding the quantity, what's the embodied carbon of that quantity, of that material, and just getting your embodied carbon at the end. So it's a very, very simple calculation for a group of engineers that work with a lot more complex problems. But the only reason we are not having that built into every single design, every single project, is that we can't find the data, or we can't agree on where to start and what to calculate. So, for example, this is out of Thomas's book. He's worked on a project where they were essentially looking at changing a conventional RC arch on a tunnel to a sprayed one, just to reduce all the reinforcement and save on steel. Essentially, that sounds sustainable. You're going to think you will save tons of steel, so a lot of money saved, a lot of carbon saved. You'd be wrong, considering how much wastage there is with sprayed concrete. At the end, they realize conventional method of the RC design, as in terms of carbon, was a lot more efficient. Although it might be different with money, would have been a lot more efficient to go with. So we came up together with the BTSYM task group that Thomas mentioned, to come together, clients, contractors and designers, everyone. We need a representative from each one of those groups to make sure we're looking at it as a system, it's attainable, achievable guidelines for everyone to use in every project. We're going to agree on how to calculate carbon, when to record it, and what to record. Is there things that we should just leave out, or is there things that we definitely need to make sure we monitor rather than just think about and record and decide on as a design stage, and develop a framework altogether? So the big announcement that Thomas said I'm going to do is please join into that group. Please volunteer. Even if you can just contribute an hour of your time, if you can do just one presentation, one slide, one Excel spreadsheet that you've made, that still benefits it. And it's a combined effort. We can't do it on our own. It can't be done by one person. That's it. Thank you.
Could I ask a volunteer or two to hold the roving mics? Thank you, George.
Any questions?
One at the back, thank you. Apologies, I never get the hang of how close I need to speak to these microphones, so apologies if I blast you.
This is probably actually more a question to you about the wastage. What factor of wastage did you consider for the SCL?
I think that was around 100% wastage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. That was...
Yeah. So
I actually have a second question. Sorry.
I think I'll just probably add a bit. Obviously, this is a whole bunch of ideas kind of squished in to launch a project rather than the outcome of the year's work that we're trying to do. The specific example was a crossover cavern that had a lot of awkward geometry. So it was originally a sacrificial primary lining, natum and rock, and then PVC membrane and a conventional cast in situ lining. The main issue was program-based. So with the access for the cavern, it was going to delay the whole project. So the idea was to use sprayed concrete to avoid all the complex shuttering and time-consuming steel fixing. So there was probably to a certain degree a cost program advantage of doing the SCL, which kind of, even if it's not sustainable in terms of carbon, there was perhaps a bit of financial sustainability. And then also with a properly managed SCL method, there's probably health and safety benefits of not working at height and not working with heavy steel cages. So I think it's just perhaps an example of, first of all, you have to balance those three things. And the second thing is that without actually running the numbers and doing a simple calculation, we thought that we were helping carbon, and it was just something that we assumed intuitively by removing the steel. But you also have to consider the fact that sprayed concrete has a very high Portland cement ratio to get the early age strength, and it also bounces off the wall when you spray it. So I think the goal really is to develop a bit of tunnel-specific carbon guidance that highlights those issues, and gives a young engineer or even a senior engineer an idea of where to start for tunnels. But beyond that, we're really open to keen individuals and good ideas. I hope that answers the first question. You said there was a second question?
Yeah, second question, which is possibly too early as you've not started the task force, is do you envisage just looking at, I don't know the terminology, but I know that with carbon, you've got your primary and the stuff you're using, and then you've got your suppliers' emissions as well. Like, how all-encompassing, or is that just dependent on how many people you get on board and what you get to?
Do you want to go?
I say the key thing is just to make sure that everyone knows the principle of a life cycle assessment and the level of detail that's appropriate over the course of the project maturity. So it's like at the very beginning when you're looking at, do we want to just rough volumes of concrete and rough materials? That's where I think you can make quite a big impact. And for that, you could, if you had a table of just a few factors, you could run some numbers in an Excel spreadsheet. that's a way to make a big difference early on. And then I think as the project matures and you're choosing suppliers to sell you the materials, that's where you could start looking at more of that level of detail. So my answer is to a level that's appropriate for the life cycle stage. Do you have anything to add to that?
Just basically to add to that and kind of emphasize what you said. That's the whole point of the task force, that we agree on what stages we're looking at for what's appropriate for what project, and then set that baseline so everyone knows. So say for a building project, not all building projects do a full BREEAM assessment. Not all tunnels need to do a full, say, from cradle to grave carbon assessment. Sometimes it's more than enough to do just up to use, not even in the use stage or end of life stage, because more than 50% of the carbon emissions sit in the first two design and construction stages anyways. So it would be small steps make very big differences in that context.
Question at the front. Well, just if you could use the microphone so the people online can hear. And while George is walking over, I'll just say to the people online that I've got my phone out, and if they'd like to ask a question, they can just put it into the chat and I will read it out, as long as it's respectful, because online you never know what you're going to get. But
just Negin's name just on the question. It's Ignacio Vasquez from Montmedon. I was wondering how would the guidance be different from the ITA guidance that's about to come out on low carbon linings?
I think that's a very good point. And I do actually have a draft of that guidance, which I unfortunately haven't read yet. And I think it's still early stages. What we might do is perhaps we just decide to do a bunch of training around that, and we look at that and say it's good enough, or we do a bit of a British addendum with country-specific factors like what UK recycled steel carbon factors are, just so that it makes the process easier, not necessarily coming up with a different process. I'm waffling a bit. I don't know if that makes sense, Negin.
Almost the same answer. But essentially for carbon calculation, the database and the factors you use is the most critical bits of it, when you agreed on what stages you go to, obviously. But if we can agree on where those factors come from and what's a credible resource, and come together and create that set of data list, basically, it would make a lot more easier way of just kind of implementing that ITA even guidelines. We don't know what it looks like yet, but definitely it would be something that we can build up on the back of whatever is available in the industry.
Yeah, there are like a lot of databases out there already.
Yeah, but which one to use? That's the question.
And I think I fully accept what you're saying, and I think from perhaps one of my goals is when the first carbon assessment I did, through my CPD, I went and kind of read a bunch of things, tried to figure it all out, kind of signed up to a few things to try to download the database, and then find they wanted to sell me something, or signed kind of a form to get the Environment Agency's calculator, and then I found that I couldn't really do a mixed design calculation with that calculator, and then I went on to something else. And I think what I've ultimately realized is that a competent engineer could easily knock one up in Excel in 10 minutes if they had just kind of like a table of, well, these are the typical materials we use. It's quite easy to do like a paper napkin calculation. And that's kind of where I'm thinking of going with this, just to educate people as to what the calculators are actually doing, and to make people realize that it's easy for them to do it as well.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
I can nothing from online, but I have a question. So I think in your list of actions that we could take, there is educate, inform, set baselines, share information, encourage. This seems to be very focused on us as professional engineers to solve this problem. Do you think, though, that we're going to come up with a barrier in terms of cost, where it's not always easy to do the sustainable thing, and I guess I don't know if you comment on what the government could do to, or international governments could do to help us on this journey.
Definitely agree. I definitely don't think it's only on us as engineers to actually make it happen and make it work and make it sustainable, because as I said, you can't look at it as a silo. It needs to be a system. It needs to come together as a harmony. We can't just look at carbon and not look at the economical aspects of it. Obviously it makes a lot of difference if a project finishes a year earlier than what it was supposed to do, but what maybe higher carbon depends on where that balance is. We need to find that balance, and each project would be unique. So it's finding that framework and defining that framework that we can use to kind of define that balance for every project in that context of that project. But definitely I think it's a matter of the legislators, so the governments, the clients, us, designers and contractors all coming together. That's why I say educate is not just engineers knowing how to calculate carbon or how to design a low carbon project. It's more about, say, training that very good nozzle man with SCL so you don't have as much of a fallback if you sprain. It's like smaller things that make a difference.
Okay, we have another one at the back.
Hello, Ben from MOTS. It's a question for both of you. Tom, I know that you've been in this industry for almost 10 years.
Oh, you're gonna publicly name me like George did when he said I was doing my professional review. I passed, by the way.
Yeah. So it was a question for both of you, as you are in the designer side, just to know if you have seen a progress along these last 5 years in the attitude on clients and contractors regarding carbon and sustainability. Have you seen any change in attitude? Or
my answer would be very short, so I'll go first. I haven't been around the industry that long, so. But I feel like there is at least in the past 2 years, there is a gradual interest from everyone. Even the designers not all designers were interested in sustainability aspects of a project. You do a very good design, it doesn't necessarily mean the intentions were sustainable design. Sometimes excellence in design translate into a sustainable design, but the intentions behind it doesn't necessarily mean was there. But as I said, if we set the targets realistic enough for the contractors to be interested. Right now, you tell a contractor, this is my carbon ambitions, and they'll be like, yeah, sure, you can keep those ambitions for yourself, but that's not what's going to happen on site, because you can't see what's happening on site as a designer. So it's a lot different, unless
That's very harsh on contractors, I'd just like to say. They also care about sustainability, and they're doing quite a lot to measure things nowadays.
Agreed.
I think that would have been worth saying online. It was just a challenge from the audience of whether or not contractors are putting in much effort, which I think is fair. In terms of, I'm waffling because I haven't quite decided on my answer. I think that there is definitely more awareness in the time that I've been working. I'm thinking a lot more specifically on suppliers that like Normet comes to mind, where they're developing technologies like spray control or 3D mapping to try and reduce the amount of overspray, and to go to a thickness control rather than a double profile control where you end up adding construction tolerances. And I think it's things like that contractors can easily understand because it affects their bottom line. By spraying less concrete, they save money. So I think in that sense, there is an improvement. I hope that answers a bit of the question. I think where I was kind of leading with my question to Negin on what can the government do, my personal feeling is that the easiest way to make people understand this issue is that not everyone's prepared to really go into detail on the science. I think our 3 past ICE chairs have done a really good job highlighting this issue. I was staggered to learn that I think it was 70% of carbon emissions are indirectly related to infrastructure and transportation. So I think that's quite staggering. So I think there's work within our profession to raise awareness, but fundamentally I think the only way we're going to get rapid change is by putting a price on carbon, so that it becomes a question of the bottom line, in addition to making an ethical choice. That's my personal view, but I hope that answers the question.
Firstly, really good presentation, Negin. Having recently entered the industry yourself, do you think that there is changes to be made in the education system, like unis or even at school level, in the way we're taught to think about sustainability when thinking of construction methods?
100%. When I was studying, we did not have that many sustainable modules. We were encouraged to make those decisions and do sustainable designs when we had smaller scenario projects, but we didn't have any more of traditional education, just information received from our. We did not have that, and it would make a huge difference if we were taught where to start or what the resources are, and it definitely, the educational aspects of it is definitely essential to look at. And I think, although there is a lot of research happening in the academia side, there's not much of training happening for like the futures, like engineers that come to the industry. We are not trained to care for sustainability unless we actually just care, or the company makes you care, stuff like that. They are further behind than the rest of the industry, I guess.
Thank you.
Question for Basil.
Thank you, Negin. Brilliant presentation. I'm Asil from LBA, Chair of Schools and Universities for Sub-Chair, Tom. Thanks for your question. It was really relevant for education system as well. My question to you is, in your presentation and about carbon calculations, coming back to the topic of the presentation, why sustainability and care for it, for tunneling, are we getting too focused on cement and concrete, rather like losing sight of the ultimate goal of sustainability over here? It's just playing devil's advocate over here for.
No, I agree. It doesn't need to just be concrete.
I'll just give you an example. For example, in tunneling, spoil management is much of an issue, like as compared to carbon or concrete from other industries. And like if you have to take more movements of the HGVs and your spoil management plan doesn't work, that leads to like higher carbon usage and bottlenecks around the entire project. So like repurposing spoil for like what Crossrail did, something like wetland creation, is that we could focus more on, or is it honing more on the 70% carbon being emitted?
No, it definitely is a matter, but one of the bigger contributors to climate change is the carbon, and almost 7% of the carbon emitted is cement in the whole world. So it really makes a difference if we make the smaller changes in cement or concrete designs or production or use, but it doesn't have to be just specific focus. It doesn't need to be just carbon. It has to be everything together, a balance. As I said, you can't just forget about the money aspects of it. You can't just tell the client, this is going to cost so much more, just because I want to go with a much lower carbon design. But essentially, can you even achieve that design? Or is that realistic? And why are you costing this much more? And what's that going to affect the end user's experience? So it is, again, coming back to the thing of talking about as a system, things coming into harmony and looking at the full project, not say full project lifetime, but at least the construction and the design together rather than just one aspect rather than the other.
I think just if I could add to that, I think you raise a very good point on the emissions from moving the muck, and I think that's why I'd personally like to focus on, before just focusing on materials, really educating everyone on the process of a life cycle assessment, what that means. And I think that transport of material is exactly one of the things that's considered. So once you've done the quantitative assessment, I think it becomes easier to pick the right solution for carbon. I think one of the main challenges that's external to our influence is how you cost a carbon saving versus a societal benefit of building a tunnel, and the long-term benefit of, say, having a high-speed railway. I think that's probably one of the bigger challenges.
Agreed, yeah.
But yeah. We're getting close to the top of the hour. Can I request the final question on the presentation? I'd also invite any questions on BTSYM affairs if you happen to have any.
Just in regard to the design and construction phases and the focus on those as the primary areas to look at, what about sort of feasibility and concept stage? Because that's where you can make more influence, in my opinion. If you can influence the contract, the type of contract, to make sure that the drivers are built into the contract mechanism, the client is fully behind it, the contractors will sign up to what's in there, and it'll be done on a fair basis. The mechanism at the moment is competitive, so generally driven by price. And if you enter into a contract and then decide to take a more expensive option, then it's off-putting for contractors. So what's your thoughts on expanding it beyond just design and construction phases?
I agree. It's the earlier you get involved, you make a bigger difference and a much bigger change. We have to start somewhere, and 50% of the emissions are from the design and construction. So we start with the bigger bulk of the work, basically. And if we can reduce those as much as we can, and then we can go back and make more differences. But I think the next step from design and construction is going back to the concept and feasibility stages, and then after that go to use and end of use, kind of. At least that's my perspective to it.
If I could ask a follow-up question on that, I was wondering, Negin, if you've had any experience discussing sustainability with clients. And if you have, are you able to share any insights?
I have not.
You have not, okay. Neither have I. So I think that's just something for both of us to work on, I think. Right, well, if there's no further questions, I think we can move to... Oh.
I've got one on BTSYM affairs.
Can I get the microphone for Divik, please?
Did I notice in your AGM slides the structure and some subcommittee brandings are slightly different this year?
Yeah, there's two changes. One is to have a vice chair, which will be she's not here today, but the idea is that Arabelle will be in a good place to take over for next year. And the main thing is the technical subcommittee. So that structure is still to be decided, really.
It looked quite good, and keeping up with the times.
Yeah.
Good job.
I think really the key thing that I will circulate the plan with the committee applications. I think my key objective is to make sure that we start running the BTSYM like a business that has a proper succession plan year to year. I think what typically happens is the current year, by the time they get to November, are exhausted. And like the conference is a huge amount of work to put on. And I think what happens is you then slowly hand over, and then we kind of got 3 weeks to plan an event. So Negin was very kind to step in, but it doesn't really leave much time to market the events. So what I'd like to leave is a few events for next year that they've got time to kind of spool up and market everything. But it's all in the document, and it's going to be. I hope it's going to become a living document. So any comments that you have to improve, past experiences on the YM or suggestions would be very much appreciated. I hope that answers your question, Divik. Good. Okay. I think is the clicker around somewhere?
Okay.
Thanks. So BTS Health and Safety course, I think that's about 2.5 weeks away now. So that's the ICE. I'm sure more information is available online, but it really covers all the most important health and safety issues for underground construction. Again, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, the subcommittee applications will go out on Monday. That will be announced by our mailing list, which you can join by scanning the QR code. There are sometimes problems with corporate firewalls for some reason. So if you're not receiving the emails, you should be getting about 4 or 5 a month. So if you're not receiving them, please let me know. I also suggest registering with a personal email, which tends to work better. Then Thursday 16th is the main BTS evening lecture. That's on the internal ring propping of Hinkley Point C offshore connections by Christoph and James from Balfour Beatty. That's at 6 p.m. in person at the ICE. BTS December meeting on the 14th. That's on Silvertown Tunnel Update Christmas Jamboree, which sounds exciting. That's by Riverlinks CJV, again at 6 p.m. at the ICE. And then the final slide here is just the BTSYM calendar for 2024. I think a few of these are, we've got unconfirmed speakers, so there's nothing to announce yet, but the next lecture is on February the 15th, and we've got 4 next year, and then 4 workshops, and then a few site visits, which are in planning progress with dates TBC. So the next thing up will be National Tunneling Day, which we'll, I think, try to organize a social for, at the very least. And that's the last slide. So if you are not on the mailing list, please do scan that QR code, and there's a form you can fill out to join. There unfortunately is not necessarily a slide for bar sponsorship. I don't know, George, we were thinking we couldn't get it out of our budget. Okay. I was just thinking how many people are in the room, whether I could afford to sponsor the bar. And unfortunately, I think the turnout was a bit too good, which I apologize for, but we'll try to do better for next time. But thank you for coming. If we could thank Negin in the usual way, I very much appreciate that. All right.
I might buy the first round, just one round.
Beers on Divik /LBA.